conference is coming up September 4th through 5th. It's in Lincoln, right, Matt? Lincoln. Yeah, Lincoln, this year. Registration is open currently if you're an associate, AIF, or I know this one's something about the ACE, Nebraska members. I think you get free registration. And there's some great speakers and tours lined up for the conference, so check it out. Okay. Thanks to AI Nebraska, who's our partner in this design lecture series. We also want to say thank you to our sponsors for their support of the series. Shout out to Lisa Macchietto with Edified. She provided tonight's charcuterie brownies for everyone and crackers, as well as Poyner Macchietto Architecture. They are a sponsor and also allowed us to have the lecture here last minute due to our down event. So appreciate that a lot. Also want to say thank you to the Venice Creative District with the Nebraska Arts Council and Nebraska Cultural Endowment for their funding support for the lecture series. If you are an architect, AI member, and need CEU credits, there are business scan code right there, QR code scan, and there's a couple on the back tables, so get your CEUs if you need those. And I think that's it for now. AI Omaha, we had a membership meeting online meeting August 15th. So if you're an AIA Omaha member, we'd love for you to attend that. And then we're kind of tackling 5 critical topics educated by a membership for our design and architecture community, and to further opportunities for community engagement as an organization. So, okay, I think that's everything. Go ahead and get Peter teed up here, our tonight's speaker. Peter Goché is a practicing architect, artist, and educator, and founder of Goché Inclusion and Black Contemporary, a type of atelier whereby expert architects, artists, curators, theorists, and philosophers in the field of spatial phenomenology are invited to participate in the examination of ongoing research assemblies and present their work to the agrarian public through on-site workshops and field talks. Using site-adjusted installations as a primary mode of practice, Goché deploys an integrated approach to both theoretical and practical questions pertaining to the nature and impact of materiality specific to the reoccupation of post-industrial spaces. His research on material practices has been published in a number of edited books and journals, including Architecture of the Performing Arts and Architecture and Culture. He has co-led workshops at the 2014 and 2018 Venice Biennale. And with that, please welcome Peter.
Okay, I'm going to begin with a little video here of some work I did years ago, but I want to start here as a kind of jumping off point, maybe. Okay, so this is probably be a little bit more casual than you might imagine a lecture to be, so let's call it a chat. Can you all hear me? Okay. All right. So I'm gonna cover two terrains, Goché inclusions and Black contemporary today, or this evening. Really, the Goché inclusions is in a sense, a byproduct of me studying architecture and being an architect. Is that me? Okay. Stay behind the line, Pete. All right. So Goché inclusions is really a byproduct of me studying architecture and doing architecture like, we all do. So thanks to the AIA Nebraska for having me. I'll try to cover the learning objectives, but don't tell me if I don't. And also thanks to Allie Poyner and I forgot your name, Lisa? Yeah. Lisa for the hors d'oeuvres and Allie Poyner for the hosting, and Tom and Ross Maple Street for having me here. But I really want to cover these two in the sense of thinking about research practice as a kind of experimental endeavor rather than a professional endeavor. All right, so I have my practice. It's a solo practice. The only kind of support staff I have are Oliver, one of my sons, and one of my other son, Jude Goché, and once in a while some input from my wife. All right, so but I do that work, and then on the other hand, I have an experimental, what you might call laboratory or field station, about 3 miles south of Ames in an old abandoned seed drying farm set of buildings. There's 19 acres and 43 buildings. I rent 4 of those buildings and run the operation out of there. So, but I want to backtrack a little bit and then we'll dive in. All right. So backtrack 40 years. Let's say 40 years, 45 years. All right. When I was a kid. All right. I grew up on a subsistence farm. Everybody know what that is? So we grew everything we needed to eat. We stored it all through the winter. And the only thing we were subsidized with was, this is 1970s, okay, the oil embargo days, everybody's kind of poor, right? It's a kind of different recession than we have now, or recently, but it was a recession for sure, and we lived on this farm. I'm one of 14 children. That doesn't explain the whole story, Jared. I'll tell you that later. Anyway, I'm a kid on the farm, just kind of what Father might have thought of me as a helping hand. But we're out there and we're making do there. All right, so we're butchering our own animals, all our livestock, and we're raising our own vegetables. And so we spent most of our time gardening or butchering or going to school in the winter and walking across snowbanks to get to the bus. Because I was a geek. I was the one that got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, made the pancake dough for everybody, and then got my meal, and I headed towards the bus because it was a half-mile walk. Like, this is a real story. It's not really made up. It's kind of a sad story, but it's the way it was then. And we had a lot more snow then. I don't know if you remember that in the 70s. We had more snow back in the 70s. Huge drifts. Couldn't get through our road, so we had to walk over the drifts to the passable road that the school bus would stop on. So, in hindsight, fabulous experience because it taught me the skill of, I would say, observation. You had to use your imagination out there on the farm because we didn't get to leave much. So that's where I grew up. I have a book coming out in about 30 days that I had hoped to have here, but it's a text book in the sense that it's a literary piece called Of Course and Table Tongue. So it deals with that experience in the 70s, which to me, now that I've written about it, I can now put it away as kind of this other world that I used to live in. And it's like truly other for me, or ulterior. So the reason that's important to me is I think that's why I started to learn how to be both observant and a kind of experimentalist. Tinkering around with things. Some by nature of having to, others by the nature of wanting to just experiment. Moving into that, I'm going to move into the Goché inclusions first, which will be a little bit more sort of, I suppose, traditional in the sense of architectural practice, but It deals specifically with rehabilitation of buildings. I basically fix broken buildings like I'm sure some or most of you have worked on, but this is primarily what I do, and this is where the work starts for me as a, you might call it an economic generator for the research practice, which you'll see in the latter half. I'm going to go fast through images because I got to get through 99 images in some like 45 minutes, and I don't want to bore you too much, but I do. And Ross was great to point out all the you know, salient intellectual details. All right, so I don't have to bore you with that anymore, right? But it is phenomenology, or what I call the other F word, all right, that I deal with. All right, so this is going back to the video. The video was made with our family across the street that was doing that, and then this is a student performing the piece. But basically, this work was exhibited in the Bemis years ago. I don't know, 15 years ago, something like that. But it was a work that I'm really happy with. But I used to do a lot of construction with wood. I still do some, but I used to do a lot more. And this is basically a laminated glue lamp that I've constructed out of cedar timber. It now resides on the 33rd floor of a skyscraper in Des Moines. Law firm. It's a really great law firm in the sense that it bought this, and it has the largest collection of my work. So it's good in that way. And this is it in the context of that office space. All right, and that's one of my. There's two of them, so you'll see this one's a little different. So those are there, but there used to be a lot of time spent in the garage doing that work. So now we're going to move really into the rehab component. And I don't know if you are aware of the Bel Air Ballroom in Des Moines, in West Des Moines. And Bel Air is basically a modern day room for basically music year round. Okay, so the owner here, Sam Summers, basically grabs gigs from across the country and brings them in, and they do these gigs. This is the old man, I think they used to call it the poor man's country club. It used to truly be a ballroom, but it was built on the foundation of a 1920s rubber plant factory. They built the first level, which was half in the ground, half out. And then they stopped because of the Depression. I think it was the Depression that hit. And so they pulled back. Then somebody came along and actually constructed an open air ballroom on top of that. And then in the 70s, somebody came along and enclosed it with a metal Quonset hut type building, not Quonset, metal pre-engineered type building. And then it was finished out a little bit. So that was the historical aspect we were dealing with. I do deal with SHPO, if anybody does that. So state and federal oversight is critical to most of these projects. The thing we did add was a fly bay, which you see here, to give more volume to the space and to allow for more modern gigs to come show and participate in the play here. This is my favorite image of the project, mostly because this project was, in a sense, it's a large one for me, for like a single guy, you know, or single person practice. But it's a monster of a project because, as most of you know, MEP is a really hard drive. Like, you gotta fit all this stuff. And the trick here was to, within the existing roof envelope and ceiling envelope, we had to stick all this gear, right? And it's not easy. I can't even say it's fun. You know, once you get the paycheck, okay, it's starting to be kind of fun. But but you know, what's amazing is that it does start to evolve. But it's an amazing amount, a lot of work to me, orchestration. In a sense, all the design is behind the scenes. You don't get to see it after you get done, because after you get done, you get this, right? Which is beautiful, of course. I've fallen in love now with this idea of black on black on black on black, right? These layers of black. So I'm very compelled by that now. But this is the building that we're dealing with and restored. So that's from atop the stage looking down. You can see the pre-engineered struts here, right? They're covered in wood in this case, but you can imagine what those were. That's the old this is the old bandstand stage, where the stage I just showed you is the new stage. And this is the old lounge. You know, these kinds of places you sit and drink while you watch a lot, and then you can look out on the dance floor there, or you can dance. And then this is one of the bars, and the other bar, an entrance, and that's a live shot of one gig anyway. All right, so moving on. So the reason I'm kind of showing you some of these is like these old buildings have a kind of materiality to me that have presence in the sense of both their agedness and their sort of actual sort of rawness, right? And so I'm kind of fortunate I don't really get to deal with clients who are rich, you know, like Tom, but you know, I'm making do, trying to keep up with him. So, but it is a different thing. So in this farmhouse, this is an addition, not a rehabilitation, but it was an old farmhouse, and we added this segment on to attenuate the kitchen, and we also added the porch and the entry there to the farm lot. So the whole idea here was there's a little lake over here which you can't see in the image, but was to basically capitalize in the winter. Everything goes kind of banal visually, right? But what we want to do is somehow capture the light and bring it in. And so we were playing with this hyper-extended sort of window frame, right? And in this case, screen frame. And we painted it this particular off-white, off-yellow, kind of slightly green color to, in a sense, tint the interior of the building. All right, so that was the whole trick. But here's the building. Closer. Here's the, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this screen, seeing what, okay, this is the back of the building with the scupper. So this is, you know, sometimes a farmer's got to get straight from the kitchen to the cattle yard, right? That's that door, okay? And this is the interior. Now, I didn't do the interiors in the sense of decoration. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I don't do it this thick and rich, right? If it was me, all right. But we had the wife had a friend who wanted to play that part, and it was great in a way because I actually like it. I don't have pictures of it for you, but most of the restroom vanities and stuff have really great knobs, like they're buttons from all sorts of old antique stuff. So that was my favorite part, but the rest was kind of hard to work with. But this is the kitchen area, and then this is the living room area. Here's the light coming through here, and it kind of bounces in and does this yellow tint. Yes, I understand you think I'm fooling you. I'm not, because there's some yellow in there, right? Yellow pigment. But there's also this augmentation by the color, and you can only pick it up slightly in camera by the ceiling. So it's about trying to make somebody happy in the winter on a gloomy day, right? And then this is the little gallery, fantastic collection of artwork he has there, and then a little restroom or bathroom upstairs in the attic. Okay, this building's kind of banal. It's like 1912, I think. I think it's the second oldest building in Des Moines, at least surviving building. And we restored this, all right, and we added a stair tower over here, an elevator tower, and a lobby that was between the two buildings. And restored this. Basically, we have residential, commercial, and commercial again, but this is all brewery on the first floor, offices on the second, and residential on the third. All right, so I'm always dealing, and one of the things about these that's interesting me about the projects is when we're removing material, I can take some of that material, right? It's basically a harvesting possibility for me. And so I grab some of that material for my uses. You'll see some. And this is one of the residential units in that space. All right, the next project gets a little more interesting. It's me doing historic restoration, but where we have, I think there's 30 residential units in the upper floors and then commercial down below. So we got Funky Finds down here, which is a vintage, almost said vintage junk store. the best junk you'll see in Des Moines, all right? But they sell us really great vintage stuff. But then we have these residential up here, and over here's this is a tenant space that hasn't been rented yet. I did the restoration, all that. Then the client asked me, would you do an installation? And this is like a really interesting project for me because this old armature, which used to be a billboard, if you come from the interstate, from the airport over here, you come into downtown through a road that looks right at that billboard. And I've stared at it for probably 30 years now, wishing I could do a project there. And coincidentally, he asked me if I could do a project there. So Oliver and I got the sketchbook out and we started playing around, and we came up with something like this that would, in a sense, catch the color of the sky and, in a sense, flicker during the day. So it's all really economical, raw stuff. This is just conduit, right? 3/4 inch conduit, galvanized conduit, laced into the old billboard frame. All right, and then foregrounding and backgrounding that are a series of artifacts. One from the building, historical artifact from the building, the flywheel from the old elevator, a buoy in the back that is dynamic and moves back and forth with the wind, and then this is just a megaphone. All right, so this is a little bit like me thinking about William Kentridge. You guys look at William Kentridge? No? Okay. He's a drawing artist, and he does these flamboyant sort of episodes where somebody's blowing in this horn. It's I don't know, they're powerful. You'll have to look at them maybe. So this is another image of that, but this conduit catches that color of the sky and reflects it. So this is a sort of edge image. And I think we had a lot of fun working on it, right? This one's just it's another older building, 1920s, maybe 30s, but this has got a really interesting name. It's called the Pitt Carriage Building, but who owned it back in the 30s was an amazing story. They made carriages, okay? It's a factory. Back then, most factories, almost all factories, particularly in Iowa, were male operated, right? And owned. This one was owned and run by Maybelle Pitt. So we did this thing, and then ultimately, I think its second use was a ostrich egg. So they used to hatch ostriches here in Des Moines. I don't know why, but I didn't get the rest of the story on that one, but it was interesting. So we converted it into an office space above and a restaurant space below. This is going up the stair or looking down the alley, and then this is up in that office space. This is a lobbyist, political lobbyist type firm. So they got their offices down here, and this is so because you're wondering like, why the hell is this out here? This is where they lobby. There's really no more to the story. Except, we all agree politicians are crooked, right? And especially lobbyists. This line of columns, totally crooked. And that's what we made the show of. It was like, it goes all the way down the building, and it's exhibited all the way through the building. It's pretty funny. So, at least I laughed a lot myself about it. So. This is really one of my first restoration projects called the Walnut Tire Building, and this was a little bigger project in the sense of my youthfulness, but we basically replaced all the windows, rebuilt all the doors so they would match the historic imagery. As is evident on most of these, you use photography, old photography, newspaper accounts for your evidence to reconstruct. The most interesting thing about the building, I'm going to go back here a little bit, is above this entrance, the building is built in two halves. This half was built first, I believe, and then this half was built second. Between them is this light well, which, architect with clients who have no funds dreams of. Never get to build that, but here it is. So what we did was we put a skylight above here to illuminate, and then that light penetrates down through the glass to the restaurant below. But also then the corridor surrounds this for the residential units, and so all the corridor here is, the corridor surrounds these two walls. So you walk around this way, which means the ones on the right side, the residentials, are small studios. They get to borrow that light through the corridor. The two large, very large apartments, one I'll show you pretty soon, get to borrow the light directly from the light well. So this is that corridor from the inside. And then this is one of the large apartments. I'm not really showing you the large pictures just because they're kind of like, I think they're like, I want to say 4,000 square feet each. Like, for what, right? But they rented them. So here we are. We're halfway through. Is that all right? We're doing all right? Okay. Maybe too fast. I'll slow down. Now we're going to look at Black contemporary. So we're making a shift now to what I'd call the research and development, R&D section of my operation. Of course, I do teach at the same time, but I teach out here as well. So I'll get into that later. But this is really where we're working, doing a lot of experimental stuff. And just recently, we've added musicians to our opus. I'm not a musician. Okay, this is called chiaroscuro. Okay, y'all know what that is. You remember? Come on, you remember from your drawing lessons? It's an Italian idea about layered light, darkened light. You know, okay? All right, chiaroscuro. All right, so, but in this building, this is the building I started with. There's no source of light except the door here. Okay, so they're little black box theaters. So this thing's called Black Contemporary because it's like a black box theater. But additionally, I want to give reverence to the namesake of the family who owns the operation, Dwayne and Noreen Black. All right, so I said it backwards. It really occurred the other way. I was gonna honor them first, but then I was oh, black box theater. All right, but they're truly like black boxes. They're each of these. So this is a drawing operation. So remember, we're in the 1970s. These guys are out here doing their thing. I'm up there starving. Remember, Northeast Iowa, I'm starving. They're down here, just enjoying it. Then Monsanto and who is it? What's the other one? Monsanto and you know what I'm talking about. Poyner moved in, right? And they did a bigger operation of making parent seed for farmers to, plant. And they drove these kinds of operations out of business. By the way, it was the biggest one in Iowa at that time, but they couldn't compete economically with Poyner and Monsanto. So I'm not saying Monsanto and Poyner are bad people. I would take a commission if Poyner came to me. But and if there's anybody from Poyner, please talk to me afterwards. But anyway, this is the deal. These are old seed dryers. The materials, the corn is dried on the corn here, and then it's shuttled through a series of conveyors over to here, which is a sheller building, and that takes the corn off the cob, and then it's sent by conveyor over here to another sorting shed, which you'll see the interior of later, a little bit later here. Okay. Am I moving a little from the mic a little too much for anybody? Is it all right over there? Okay. All right. So this this is the operation above. Okay. So this is where Dwayne and Noreen live, and they have all their livestock over here. Sometimes they have some livestock over here, and oftentimes I'll see hogs or cattle running free out here, and then I have to call the boss, Noreen, and say you got some animals out. But anyway, but this is essentially where I live on this side of the road, and this is the shop building where I do a lot of the work, and And Oliver's starting to do a lot of work out there, and we run a couple of workshops out there where Tom, Prince, and Ross have been out there. But the original building is here. Do I have this point? Yeah. Do I have that right? I haven't looked at these images in a while. Yeah. This is the building that I was just showing, and that's where I have the educational block. I'll explain that later. And then this is the sorting building, and that's the shop. And then I rent one of these round ones as well, mainly for storage. And then you see this, and then if you see it here again, these are timber piles. About a half mile this way, they buried the Bakken oil line in the middle of January. All right, and I came back because I don't usually hang out here in January; it's too cold. But I came back and all this timber was here, and so I started working on this pile quite a bit because I'm very enamored by staged material or piles, right? So piles of things. So or stacked maybe, but this one, I'm just trying to tell good stories, all right? I told Ross it's more interesting to tell good stories or tell stories than to try to wow you with somebody's intellect, right? But somebody came in here and started a fire in that building on a day when there was a straight line wind blowing from the south straight this way, 27 miles per hour. Turns out it was one of the firemen who were on duty that night. All right? It was pretty interesting because I was called out to the farm late that night because I had some vested interest in it as a renter. And but anyway, I jumped in with the boss Noreen, and we drove around and we found his pickup, and he in fact had all the goodies in the back to do such a thing. And they saw him on the site just before the fire. He apparently had some sort of vendetta with the family. That part she didn't tell me, but I mean I know that part, but she didn't tell me the details. But anyway, the fire was set. I think there was some acetylene tanks in here that blew up. Anyway, the fire spread by that wind and burnt this whole pile down. Now that pile's 12 foot tall, right? Doesn't seem like very tall, but it's tall. And that is something like this. Well, it's twice as big as this pile. So I can tell you, it's a 5-alarm fire, and it burnt for 5 days. There wasn't anything putting it out; it's too hot. All right, but they had to control and make sure the rest of the buildings didn't go up in flames. So that was a wonderful harvest for me. I remember walking out. I don't have video for you. I remember walking out because all that timber has round iron about that big in it and about that long because they had basically sticks, 12-foot long sticks hooked together, 3 re-rods, and these were basically ground mats that they used on the Bakken oil line. So it's ground shoring. So they put it on the ground so they don't disturb the ground. That way they can dig that backhoe line and lay that pipe and then move the mats. And essentially you never seen anything happen, right? I'm almost thinking they did it at night, right? Government is pretty clever sometimes. So all that timber was burning, and 5 days later it's smoldering ash, and all that steel's laying there red hot. It had iron oxidized and turned red. So beautiful. So I just remember walking out through the smoldering ash because it wasn't too hot, but because I was harvesting some of that steel, which I later that winter came back and did a. So I later did a show at I don't know what's the other gallery in town. Ross, what's the other gallery I did show at? Project. So remember, we're up here, so back on task. So all that burns down. I harvest the material, bring it to project in the winter, and can't believe it. I slept in that building for 3 days. I don't even think they provided heat over there, Ross. You guys do a great job at Maple Street. Provide heat. But project's great in its own way. So anyway, this is the site I'm working with. It was just amazing to me to see all that timber show up, but you'll see it in the next in a project going down range here. But this is called Surface Works. This is a different project. So remember I said when I was doing those historic rehabs that I harvest materials from that. This is one such set of material. This is sheet lead from the old, it was an old shower pan in a print facility. And so we harvested the lead out of that, and it has this kind of patina and concrete powder on it because they lined it with lead and they cast concrete on it. Well, they bust the concrete out and there's lead. So that's the start. And I started to basically use that as a kind of surface deformation project to kind of think about mapping in some twisted sense. When I do that, it means like this intellectual thing, which I don't really talk about anymore because I teach, but I don't really get that way anymore. You know what I mean? Jerry, you know what I'm talking about? You run in those circles and you realize this doesn't actually communicate anything. So anyway, there's lovely thinkers out there, of course, but this is another angle of that. So this is in the middle or alley space of the educational block. All right, and this is me just hoisting the material up and trying to understand it. And then this is looking at it from above down. The beautiful part about this project, this building, is there's 3 layers. Second floor, I can look down to the first floor, which is something I really wanted in a studio, so I could observe the work from multiple perspectives rather than just at grade. The other reason I really like this building was because, and you'll see the interior spaces as we go forward towards the end of the lecture, but it had these bins, and in the bins were these sloped surfaces, graded surfaces for drying the corn, and it was actually the first time as an architect I thought, oh, I could actually draw at a scale that I'm not comfortable, right? You know how we, like as architects, we draw these excruciating details and everything's got to be perfect and dimensioned and like, oh my God. It gets old for me. And kind of excruciating, really. So I was able to come here and do, I got 4 foot by 8 foot pieces of plywood, and I was able to draw on those. So these are what I call field notes. So if you know anything about anthropology, field notes are the notes that the ethnographer takes while they're out in the in culture with the community, presumably laboring with them if they're trying to build actual trust, right? So, but they take notes on the culture, and then they turn that into an ethnographic report, all right? So instead of taking field notes in the traditional sense of jottings or notations on in a notebook, these are me pushing material around and making visual notes using debris from the farm to record the kind of material culture of this place. This is all lithographic ink on the background here, and I use, so you know, if you've worked with printing, I'm sure a couple of you have, they use lithography ink really minimally, right? It's all about trying to get as little on as possible because it takes a while to dry. Well, this experimentalist doesn't do it that way. I use a pound of it, which is a whole can. It's ridiculous. It's a can that would last a printer quite a long time, but anyway. This is a pound of lithography ink, and it's basically highly, you know, it's refined petroleum oil, wouldn't you say? It is. It's a byproduct of petroleum oil, right? It's a very interesting thing for me to draw with this stuff and think about the landscape of Iowa that is in fact dependent on petroleum oil to actually create and harvest at an economic rate currently, okay? And particularly in the 70s when this building set came up. And that's in fact what made the place crash, right? The 70s oil embargo. Costs went way up on fuel, and they couldn't keep up. So anyway, if you put one layer on, it absorbs into the plywood. If you put 2 layers, that's where this is, it doesn't absorb, it suspends, which means the oil starts to show up, right, as this kind of opalescent bluing, right? And it's quite beautiful to me. Again, phenomenology. This is much more bluing, much more suspension that I was going for with another sort of farm debris and scrap applied to it. All right, and this is the other one. Again, more opalescence, spent tire, and some horse harness tack. Because I was interested in these ideas of transportation from when they started farming to these days using farm trucks. Okay, moving on. This is a really great story. What time is it? How far are we into this, Ross? All right. You guys hanging all right? Okay. This story is really great just because I'm a little boy from a farm, Catholic family. I was called into Sioux City one day because a guy wanted me to look at 3 buildings that he wanted to restore. So I'm rambling over there thinking, God, this 3-hour drive kind of sucks. But I got there, and it's in the old historic part there. I don't know, you guys probably know Sioux City. I know you do. Don't you? You do? Yeah. It's in the old historic area, which is just up from, I believe, the cattle corrals, or where the cattle corrals used to be. All right. These 3 buildings. One's a sewing factory, which I'll tell you more about. One's a brothel. And what was the other one? I forget the other one, but the two more interesting ones are the sewing factory and this Elf Sewing and the brothel. So we walked through this brothel, and I'm too excited. Like they truly locked the door after they shut the brothel down. All the key rooms, all the little rooms for visiting, the ladies. So basically what happened, the cowboys would drive the cattle in town, take their money, and come up to the saloon that was on the first floor. Now it's a current bar. And then they go upstairs and have some fun, presumably with other folks. So anyway, that was across the street from this other building called Elf Manufacturing. Elf Manufacturing makes denim for Wrangler, Gap, and Levi. They farm it all out now, of course, labor. So in this building is this ancient sewing lab with all the colored thread bobbins still loaded, 30 sewing machine stations, like most beautiful thing. I didn't bring a picture because I can't even find my pictures of it, right? But what I noticed in the basement was some of these, and we were going to restore these buildings. We didn't restore them. The guy said it was too expensive. This set of material was laying in the basement of this building, and I called back a year later, said, hey, I can't stop thinking about that paper that was laying in the basement. He said, oh, you mean those patterns? I said, yeah. He said, what do you want with those? I said, it's paper. It's, I'm at Iowa State. We do things on paper. He's an alumni from Iowa State, and he says, oh, hell yeah, come on over and get them. This is in the winter. And I said, okay, I'll be over there tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. 3-hour drive, remember, he knows all this because he's from Iowa State. He says, it's a 3-hour drive, right? I said, yeah. He said, there's an ice storm coming tomorrow, right? I said, yeah, but I think I can get in before it gets there. He said, okay, I'll see you here. So we get over there, we load this up. This is about 750 pounds of paper, all right? This is really thick stuff. And it fills the back of my payload in my truck, right? And he looks around, he says, it seems like you got quite a bit of room in the back of your cab. You want some more? I said, sure. So we went upstairs to the sewing lab, and then in the sewing lab, he had the 1980s patterns. These are the original patterns, right, for those pants. Because they did all the mock-ups here, and then they farm it out to other I think mostly in the Americas, factories to do the labor. So they build the models here, and they send them back to proof with the Wrangler, Levi, or whoever the powers that be, and then they build them So anyway, these are the original patterns. I brought them back, and they're now hanging in the educational block. Powerful stuff. This project called Inside Out. Remember the timber pile I just told you about? Not the one that burnt, but the other one. This is one first enamoration with the pile, whereby I built this kind of studio or observation space beside the pile, because I wanted you to like look into the pile and see what I saw, which is the void, right? You don't see anything, you just stare, and it occupies you for a long time. This is one of the little rooms that I built to isolate you and looks up at the sky, so it's kind of a sky room. And it's here in the drawing, here. So you come in, and this is the earth room, this is cut earth, and then there's a platform that leads you around to the sky room, and then here's another little platform. This is really the observatory. You could sit and look into the pile. So remember my ink drawings? I'm just using it to make the, you know, because the sticks have a relationship to petroleum oil now, right? The Bakken oil line, right? So, but this pile has all these voids in it, and it's amazing to look into. So that's what we built here. That's what it looks like from an aerial perspective. And this became a kind of conversation pit. That's the sky room there, and then this is the observatory over there. And then on one occasion we did another experiment where we put a ladder up here to the pile, and I have this big parachute, cargo parachute, and we skirted the ladder with a cargo parachute, and then I had a person ascend and basically put on the dress. But the dress hangs 12 foot down below him, right? The cargo chute. And then the wind picks up and it bellows up, and it's mind-numbing, beautiful. I actually had 2 people get in that. One of them was in the audience. Okay, next project. So, if those are all buildings that are systemic, meaning connected to each other and in a group, this is the building about 4 miles down the road that I then bought or am buying or am squatting on. I know it's convoluted, but you know, I'm paying $1 a day rent to own type thing. He wants me to move the building. I'm just squatting as long as I can, $1 a day, till he says, I'll just buy it. I'll sell you a little piece of property, whatever. They want to get rid of these, the farmers want to get rid of these things, but they don't want to tear them down themselves. You'll see why once we look inside. Okay, this is a 1944, I believe, seed dryer, corn dryer. Okay, so you're getting the idea, right? I'm into silos and bins, right? That's where I came from. All right, so this has a perforated corrugated metal skin. Like, think about that. That's hard to find these days, but you'll see why it's powerful on the inside. And it's got, inside it has these stacks, these round pipe stacks that are perforated as well. And then on top is the vent, or the ventilator, and the little mohawk follows the wind, right? It doesn't look like it right now, right? It isn't today, because it's a still day. But when it follows the wind comes into the small one and it expands there, and it creates a vacuum, it pulls air up through. So this is a passive dryer, whereby they can basically reduce spoil in the corn, right? Because if you don't do it this way, you're going to end up in the interior of the corn pile spoiling because of a biological material when it heats up when it gets collected like that. This is a really beautiful picture for me, because this is the way the snow arranges itself relative to the wind. So fluid dynamics become interesting, especially when you think about the fluid dynamics of the building itself, wind going through it, being a dryer. Okay, this is what it looks like on the interior. So this is the big mind-blowing part about the project. All those little, these are all little crescent space. These are all little crescent holes. They're like, it's a half tab, cut like that, punched into the corrugation. It does 2 things. It illuminates. Okay, I know they did it for ventilation purposes, right? For moving air through the corn. But for me, the illuminatory aspect is really powerful. The light hits the tab and bounces back up on the corrugation. And you get all these thousands of what seem like candle lights almost on the side. As well, and it took me a long time to figure this out, all these light spots, I was like, wow, how the hell does a crescent shape make a round circle? Right? It's like really confusing. So I had to go back and read all my, light box observatory books, right? Pinhole camera. Those are images of the sun. And so we were able to make a final test, 3-4 weeks ago? No, I guess it was last semester. Whenever we had what's this, what was it called? The solstice? Not the solstice. Eclipse, right? And we were able to actually record some of the eclipse suns in here. So it's just mind-blowing to me that there's 1,000 suns inside this building. And did this installation. It's called perforated horizon because all these perforations, as you go higher in the building, you can actually start to see the horizon. When you're down low, you can't because the perforation, you're too low visually because you can't really see out here. But as you go up, you get to see down through the perforations and see the horizon. So that's what this whole ascent was built then as a matter of doing that. As well, I wanted to, all these empty panels or missing panels here, the wind had torn off, and so I was trying to basically build both an ascent to look at the horizon as well as to rise to the opening here and create an oculus that would then look at the moon or the celestial scene above. So this is that raised platform, and this is the oculus, and that's the moon, right? This little character is very elusive. Anybody calendar the moon? Do you calendar the moon? Back there with the drink? No? You do? You do. It's hard to track the moon. The moon is very elusive in my mind, but if you calendar it, you can probably figure out what it's going to be there. I have to use luck to get out there and find it. Okay, back to the wood pile. Dad said, go out to the wood pile now. I want to take you out to the wood pile. You remember that? All right. I tore that other one down. It came to project, the wall project, inside out. Then I came back during COVID. Didn't know what else to do. When we were all getting sick of each other, so I came out here and spent 30 days cleaning wood. So remember this 12-foot tall pile. There's a crevice down here. It's about 12 feet deep. Kind of a hairy thing to maybe get stuck in because, there's how are you going to get out? Truly, if you broke a limb down there and got stuck, you got to pull a lot of timber away, right? I know a guy with an excavator, but thankfully I didn't break any limbs. But this is all, I cleaned all this timber and built this scaffold over the top to bring light down into the crevice, all right? So this is aluminum foil tape. It's the same thing you put on your ductwork at home, all right? But you got to clean the timber in order to get it stick. And so this is the rampart up to the installation. This is down inside the installation and a detail of it. And then this is above. I keep thinking these panels aren't quite Poyner, so I keep thinking I got some janky image, but it must look all right for you guys. You know what I'm saying? See that shadow? From where I am, it looks more dramatic. I'm thinking the image is messed up. Anyway, this is from the bottom of the scabbie looking up, and this is from the top looking down. All right? And I think I have an aerial eventually here for you. So that's what it looks like from above. All right? But the whole idea is how do you get light to penetrate into a deep cavern, dark cavern. All right? And then other things we do, so speaking to like learning credits, collaboration, right? So we bring strange characters out here like Ross and Tom and Mike Nesbitt and Daniel Gator Lomack, all right? did a workshop out here. And Katie Newell, she's up in Michigan, but she didn't come up for this one. But we did a workshop called Drawing Atmospheres, whereby I bring people who draw in different ways out here. So for this one, Mike Nesbitt is one of the characters, and these are his drawings, which were very exciting, I think, for at least 3 young boys in here, Ross, me, and Tom. When's the last time you've seen drawings come into the gallery on a semi and have to be picked by an excavator, right? So Mike brings 4 of these out, or Mike and Ross or somebody, and they get set, and they're incredibly beautiful. These are I don't know what the weight are. Do you know what the weight on those are, Ross? A lot. They're concrete, and he's using cobalt blue and white pigments, I guess, for the concrete, but they're incredibly beautiful things that I think also pick up on the atmospheric conditions of the sky and of course the snow in this case. There's the previous one, which is the smooth side. This is the textured side, or the non-troweled side. Incredibly beautiful as well. So that was a beautiful set of works. And then we do a workshop with the students. I think we did for one day and a couple lectures, and then we had a moderated talk, and what was it? Coors Light. Yeah, you were pretty serious about the Coors Light, I think there. All right, so, and then we had this other character come out, and this one's Tom Prince, and he did an exhibition in the educational block of a series of prints of his, and I don't have this image, but the only way you could actually come in and view them was you had to have a candle. And you brought a candle into the dark space, and you had to use a candle to illuminate the work. Do you remember this? You should. All right. Totally beautiful, totally experimental, and honestly, kind of moving. Then in the shop building, then where we do a lot of our experimentations now, with Oliver and I are working in, we did this thing called it's basically a shadow drawing device. So these are just wood cuts from the pile, remember, as seating blocks. This is a polymer plastic sort of skin that we covered the wall with, and then we hung some old wire. This is from the site. It's just a bundle of straight wire that they use for concrete formwork as reinforcing, but it's really beautiful and gangly. And then here is a track that can be adjusted so that it's basically a half circle or hemispheric, in the sense that its angle can be changed to match the angle of the sun on any particular day of the year. And then there's a light gimbal thing here that moves at 2 feet per minute, and it's 24 foot long. So over the course of 12 minutes, you get a 12-hour sort of track of the sun. And then so then what happens is the subject then both merges and emerges from itself in terms of shadow. And these are details of that. All right, so this is a very slow 12 minutes of, watching the shadow separate from subject and then merge back with it. For me, it's mesmerizing. Peyote, I don't know. I haven't done it. Maybe it's like that. All right, so. But this is, again, then down the road at the other, the solo drying bin, we did another installation later, I think 2 years later, with Daniel Gator Lomack. It's called the Guardian Spectacular, whereby he came out and built a costume and total performance out of all the debris material from the farm, and went on to do this. Wow, it's a great story. I don't know if I have time for it. I'm in the bin. I'm in the drying bin, ringing a cowbell. Everybody, the audience is out in the yard just in front of me. They don't see me. I'm locked in. And the audience is getting snockered on Japanese whiskey, something like that. Scotch, Japanese Scotch, I think. And this is how we warm them up. You know, we got to get them to feel. All right, and he emerges a half mile down the road out of the ditch and starts dragging that ladder all the way up the gravel road. Finally gets there. He cleanses the building. He does this sort of washing of the building, and then he gets the bolt cutters and, you know, opens it up, and they all come in and see where this damn bell sound's coming from. At that time, we stop, and then he ascends the stair and makes an incredibly loud set of noises and grindings, and deals with that space in a incredibly, what would you call it, physical and athletic way. He basically performs in that space very athletically, and then him and I emerge, I guess, and I think he buries something out in the ground. Can't remember exactly how that went. Okay, this is that sorter building. Remember the building I said where the grain is taken to? It's then taken to smaller bins where they get dried, and this is one of the other buildings we use. And in that, this is what that looks like. Immensely beautiful, but these are the various bins for drying. And then this is the plywood that's been run over by grain, and it exposes the hardwood versus the softwood. That erosion is really powerful. And then between it is this installation we built with Mitchell Squire. Did you see the title? I can't remember the title. Humanity's Drip and the Absence of a Barn Swallow. There's a barn swallow nest in here. This is me and birds. But and then on that, the conveyor belt moves. So what really was happening here is I would lay here, he would be down there, he would be dropping his ancestors' drip, jewelry from his ancestors, down onto the conveyor. It would go under here and under my body, and then down to the other end of the machine room and collected. So that was basically the performance. But the space is utterly beautiful. I don't know if you agree, but I think it is. And those are images of the installation. So other things we do is try to export the logic. And in this case, we did the show at the Maple Street Construct. I don't have a year on here. I don't know when that was. 5 years ago? Thank you, Ross. And I'm not sure. Tom was all good with this. I'm not sure Ross was, but we took the floorboards up and we inserted this again. Remember the sheet lead? And in this case, the goat. So this was the map, and what's the rest of the title? The porcelain goat, right. Stuff, Jared. So I like porcelain. So there's porcelain bits and pieces from households and electrical things here. And there's a dead goat. The dead goat comes from the field that I worked in over at Black Contemporary. And I don't know why, when I originally got the goat, exhumed him from the grass, he had a hole in his side right here. I don't know if somebody shot him or put him down. He had the hoof things that, like, you know how hooves, if they get overgrown, they get long and curled? So I'm wondering if they put him down. I didn't ask too many questions because they probably would have asked, well, what do you do with the goat anyway? Well, I don't know. So we did an exhibition of this thing. And there you can see the goat and the horns and the hatchet, and it's just bits of familiar things that are in context with each other. It's kind of an alchemy of things that don't maybe necessarily belong to each other, but aesthetically somehow jive. So there it is. You can see the porcelain knobs here. This is actually a lantern from the Omaha area. A lot of this is in the context of this thing I think about conflated territories. So when we're doing video projections or other kinds of alchemistic sort of arrangements, I'm thinking about the conflated territories, meaning conflating cultural territories with artifacts. So that's why, you know, something like this from Omaha is here. Well, it's in Omaha, right? But it's in the context of these things from Iowa. And then there's an old dead gourd, right? The spine of the goat. It's all super compelling to the dog that came to the show. Super beautiful, don't you think? Is anybody hungry? Imaginary, this is the last segment. This is the educational part. So I teach a studio out here, and I'll start teaching this fall in about 2 weeks here again. But each fall I do this studio out here with the architecture students, and in each of these bins, they 3 or 4 students group together as a team and build an installation. So for me, education is a problem right now because particularly with space shortage, right? We have high enrollment, but we don't have enough space. And the students barely have a wall to actually look at their work, right? And certainly they don't have that wall if they do it. If they do have it, they don't have it for very long. So this is an opportunity for me to share my space with the students and give them a space for the duration of the semester to build something and let it be there and observe it and modify it. And we go through a lot of iterations as part of the practice, but this is what we're doing out there called Black Contemporary Imaginary. This is one such installation called Resonant Landscapes by these 3 characters. And it was immensely beautiful, as I think all 3 of these will seem to you as well, but this one's in the sparing nature of it. These 3 women took bought harp string, and they strung it from the rafter through this diagonal plate. This is a perforated plate, and then they made tuning blocks below. Amazing thing to me. I think these were 2 foot on center, and you could walk through and play the landscape of strings like this if you wanted, right? So just amazing. This is it from above. I mean, it kind of looks like nothing, but super powerful auditory project. Another project is this one called Of Space and Body by these 3 characters, whereby they performed basically a dance movement on that diaphragm, and the audience, in this case, instead of being above the diaphragm being this, above the perforated diaphragm, were asked to go below, okay? And so she would perform this, and they had projection from the ceiling above, and they're projecting past her to create this shadow below. This is how you entered. You go below, right? And then, I should say the other music, the score for this was a cello piece by one of the students who had a cello. She played music, instrumental, and then they recorded it for the last performance, which is in November. It's pretty cold, so she couldn't bring the cello out. I was heartbroken, but anyway. Prior to that, she always had the cello out there. And then this is the space beneath that we sat in for the performance. This is the beginning of the performance where you can't see her up here, but the woman above here, the student above here, is set in place before she goes into her routine. And this is what you start to see. Incredibly intimate moment for the audience. As this performer moves over you, she whispers to you while she's moving, okay? Really intimate and awkward. As a professor and a student, right? But this is the kind of shadow play that you got out of that. So, all right. So last project. All right, and this is only 3 slides. This one's Vigil, and Oliver's one of the authors here. On this one, and this is where they created this kind of paganistic, ritualized environment, whereby they would illuminate the space by candle that burns from both ends, and really powerful stuff. Of course, intense because of the smoke generation, but they They also managed the smoke in such a way that you wouldn't get asphyxiated as part of the performance, right? So they would evacuate it through the baffles that were in the building that were part of the passive drying facility. And this is what that looked like from below as the bottom candle's burning. The heat goes up and the wick and wax fall down, and they make this, what do they call it, zipping sound. Zip, zip, zip. Amazing, powerful. And then all the smoke's billowing, and then the sun comes through the cracks, because it's a cruddy old building with leaks. The sun comes through and illuminates smoke. It's quite marvelous, really. And then this is an image of them. I guess this is the illumination part of the ceremony, and then in the end they're all snuffed out. I should say that this one included an oratory by, do you remember the author's name? It's The Green Man. Is that the title of it? Green Man. Anyway, a poem of The Green Man regarding the ecological cycles of time. All right, so in which that character, Oliver, over there, recited, and then they all jumped in on the, I guess it'd be the chorus line. So they would do this over and over again, and he would put out these candles. It was intense. This is just a piece of snow fence they found on site, and that was their first sort of production, was to hang the snow fence in an awkward way. Then they built the scaffold, the candle scaffold above, and this would drip onto this, and this would start to burn. And it was, I suppose, dangerous, but they had fire extinguishers. I mean, they were in control of it. So anyway, I think that's it. Thank you for your time. No questions? All right. How did I what?
Clean the goat. Like, how much of the goat was on the bone and you took it and put it in there?
Oh, it was really, at that point it was just bone, skin and bones.
Oh, okay.
Most of the flesh had already been.
Like it had a wound on the side of it. You kind of pulled the goat.
Well, the whole hide was on him still, but I could see the hole. I mean, I kind of pulled him out of the grass and got him onto a flat surface and got him over to the shop. I didn't mess around too much after that immediately. There probably was a little bit of flesh that was still being removed. You know, flies and maggots, they do a good job of that. They're pretty efficient. That's all, you just let that finish itself out. And by the time I needed to use it for an exhibition, it was all dried out, and there was no odor. But that's, yes?
So, one of 14 kids, northeastern Iowa.
Yes.
Started there, he talked about motivation, and then you just jump to this like incredibly unusual work, right? How do you get from one to the other?
How do I what?
How do you get from one to the other? Like this typical northeastern Iowa
Oh.
to this like,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the other part of the story I was going to tell Jared. So when I was in 8th grade, my father has a panel van, of all things. And he says to us kids, Saturday morning early, get in the panel van. Back then you did what Father said, right? Mom and Dad get in front, and we're hauling ass to Des Moines. This really isn't the answer to your question, but it's a funny story. Because I got to tell him anyway. So we end up to the Living History Farms, and we're going to see Pope John Paul. All right. Okay, I'm a little boy. I'm a Catholic, and it's amazing, like mind-blowing amazing. A sea of people, which I've never been, because I'm just an isolated kid on a farm. Sea of people. We're all in garbage bags. It's raining that day. And in the middle of the sea of people is a stage, the altar, and a double prop helicopter comes in. A military helicopter comes in, and this guy in a white gown pops out. Pope John Paul. Crazy, right? We all do that. That's the church thing. Then we go to my sister and brother-in-law's house that night to have dinner, and my brother-in-law says, at this time I'm a huge Gene Simmons fan. You want to go to a Kiss concert? I'm like, what? He's got tickets to Kiss, and he's already got approval from Mom and Dad to take us. So just imagine, that's how I got there. Like this distortion between Pope John Paul and Gene Simmons in the same day. I'm interested in contrast. Like total contrast is really interesting to me. So I think that helps, but I think the other thing is there's a kind of deprivation on the landscape, living on the landscape versus in town, right? That I think that allows you to imagine a much stranger world than what maybe exists, although if you watch the news at night, it's pretty strange, right? It's as strange as your imagination could have maybe charged you with. So, but I think that imagination that I built out there in what most people would call boredom was the way I was able to get, at least to this point. You know, there's a lot of people doing strange things right now, right? Really beautiful, strange stuff. Imagine some of the stuff you do in your shop are strange, you know, either for people or because, you know, sometimes the jig has to be weird, right? So that's kind of part, right? Weird is good. Somebody's campaigning on that. Right? So anyway, I think that's how I got there. I don't know. I mean, the other part is I was always very interested in drafting. Like I would challenge anybody to be a better draftsperson than me at that age, you know. Like I was really good at it, and I was expedient and all that. But I think you get to a point where that does become excruciating, making really perfect drawings, you know, that can be counted on from a construction standpoint, or an estimation present, you know, from pricing standpoint, right? But that gets really exhausting to me, even though I still do it. It's like really exhausting. I need this outlet to do these things that are, you know, not governed by code officials and state and federal, you know, financial officials from the, you know, state historic or national parks department, right? I need to be able to operate without oversight. So I think that's kind of what's going on there. Is that an answer or not?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to hear how you express yourself relative to that.
The short answer is by gravel. That's how I got there, by gravel. Black Contemporary has been on a gravel road for a very important purpose, because returning to gravel is really important to me. Like, nostalgically, it's really important to me. Gravel. Yeah, tell us.
How old are you?
57.
57, and you're worried about oil like that? How old are you?
It was impacting my family.
No, I know. I'm just thinking, like, my dad was worried about the oil market. He's 70.
Well, yeah, he was probably, you know, trying to raise you guys.
I was
Oh, so yeah,
but he was in his like 20s,
yeah.
and you were
I was
12.
12, something like that. But it was affecting me.
Yeah, all the farmers, like my dad's family lost their farm.
Yeah. But I think it's a wonderful way to maybe grow up. It's not ideal by any means. I mean, the first lesson is 14 kids will make you broke for your whole life, right? So, even though they felt they were the richest people in the world with the children, so. But a lot of great lessons out there in terms of survival. So.
Weird question. Did your parents ever talk about, or did you ever wonder or question how they got to 14? I mean, I feel like at a certain point, like you're making a choice. Like, I feel like one is too many.
Yeah. Well, you know.
But I mean, at 14, that's a commitment, you know?
It's a commitment. I guess we never asked because we knew when they started, my father was a cattle farmer, and he needed a labor pool. Why would you pay people if you could just have them? That's what I think was going. That's what we all kind of thought was going on. And then the cattle market fell out, and then they were left with 14 kids. What's that? I'm number 12. Yeah, I got 2 younger sisters. I'm the baby boy. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure why they went on after me. But anyway. But you have that many. Like I'm not real close to my older. You end up with groups, age groups that are closer to each other than, and it has to do with who was in the house at that time. Because by the time I was, middle school, my older sister's brother was way gone. Just they didn't live in the house. So, but I think it has something to do with our history. Your history, individual history, has something to do with who you are. Yeah. I mean, it is obvious, but it's like some people think it's not. Like, Osage may be the most recognizable, and we actually were in the Orchard Township, which is just an elevator and a saloon. Osage was the more developed town with, more civilized kinds of establishments, like a school, but which is up by Mason City. All right. So. Good, Ross? All right. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thanks for sticking out with me.